The question's over here. Second row.
Chris Gebhardt with NASASpaceflight.com. First off, just a huge congratulations to you and all the teams. A tremendous effort from everyone. For a lot of us wondering, for the end of the window, the publicized end of the window earlier was 4:55 p.m. and I'm just curious as to why the window was closing at 4:53 today.
Yeah, that's we do a real-time day of launch. We call it a DOLLY-LOO, a day of launch iLoad update, where we assess actual winds, actual temperatures, actual propellant loads in the ET. So the pre-flight plan was assuming for the predicted temperatures, wind profile, and expected loading in the tank, you'd have a performance to have about a 5-minute window. We knew we'd be pretty tight on that, and we didn't have very much ascent performance margin above that, and that we could expect the window to shrink. It was the same situation we were back in November, where we actually, I think we only had a 3-minute window on that first count we did on November 5th. And so when we got their day of launch today, they ran the numbers. The ascent performance margin was up a little bit, but not quite enough to give us the full 5-minute window, so we had a 3-minute window for the day today.
Bill?
Bill Horowitz, CBS News. For Mike Moses, I guess, or maybe Bill, I'm not sure. Two foam-related questions. You mentioned cryo pumping, so could you tell where the stuff came from? I couldn't tell whether it was from above or below, number one. And number two, does the amount that you saw during this ascent, obviously it was outside of your window of vulnerability, but the amount was a little higher than usual. Will that play any role in your decision to go ahead and stack 134 and go out to the pad, or is that something you guys are going to want to talk about?
Again, we'll take a look at the data and see what it means to us. By cryo pumping, what we know is by the release time. What happens is the air essentially gets behind the foam and liquefies, and then when the propellant level drops in the hydrogen tank, eventually then it warms up enough where that liquid air then warms up to the flash point and boils and then forces and pops off the foam. So this looks to us to be pretty consistent with that, with the timing we saw in the location. And the location is right around the hydrogen flange. And if you remember, we talked to you about we were concerned in that region. We didn't want to do a lot of repairs in that region because we thought we could create a path where air could then get into that super cold region of the tank and do exactly what we potentially saw here. So this is a kind of a known phenomena for us. We'll go take the time, we'll analyze, we'll make sure that this is really the same phenomena we saw, but that's our indication today. And then we'll see if it's right, and then we'll determine if it means we need to do something different in this region. But from the cursory look at what we saw today and what we saw in the ascent video, I think it's consistent with our experience base. The loss, although the size is fairly large, the mass is not very much of a concern to us from a mass standpoint, and the fact that it's late and it's kind of an understood timing consideration doesn't cause us a lot of concern, but that doesn't mean we won't still keep digging and looking and trying to understand over the next couple of weeks. But it's not inconsistent with what we've seen and what we would have expected before. And Mike, would you add anything?
Yeah, so from a whole effect to the next mission, we always kind of have that. We want to make sure we understand the in-flight anomalies, and so right now I think we're rolling over on the 28th. We'll let the team see what they chew through by then, and we'll decide if we really do want to give them a little more time before we roll over or not. So that's kind of always the real-time call that we make every time we fly.
Irene?
Thanks. Irene Klotz with Reuters for either Mike Moses or Mike Lineback. When the range called out this problem, they pretty much sounded like they were done, and Mike, you kind of told your team to calm down and take it a step at a time, and it sounded like something actually shut down, and now in talking to us you described it as a hiccup. Can you clarify at all exactly what happened and why the range seemed to be like, okay, we're done, and you all were like, no, not quite?
Well, the call that came to Mike's team and the NTDs from the superintendent of range operations was that the range was no-go, and so that was their way of saying we just had a hiccup. The same thing would happen if we'd have been sitting there and a cloud would have blown in. All of a sudden, range weather or launch weather out in Houston would have suddenly come in and been no-go. It doesn't mean that you're done for the day and you're never going to start the count again. It means I currently have a condition I cannot proceed under. And so the range had a hiccup in their system that they needed time to talk about. they weren't go to proceed before they understood it, so they threw their hold switch and said, we're no go right now, because we were very close to picking up the count at that time frame. And it's more important to make sure we've over-communicated we are not going to proceed until we understand the problem. So they threw their hold fire switch and said they're no go for operations while they proceeded to talk about the problem to see if they could resolve it. We do it all the time internally on our side. We do it both ways, right? You allow if this is a problem like this hatch tile problem, right? We could have suddenly stopped counting while we had the guys fix the tile, but we knew we were going to be able to fix that, so we proceeded on. This was one that we were too close to be able to proceed. We could buy a little more time by counting down to 5 minutes, but not much time to talk. So it wasn't ever that they had a problem they were no-go for and then all of a sudden they fixed it. It was that they had an ongoing problem they were trying to resolve, and in the meantime they were alerting us that they were no-go until they could fix that problem. It happens fairly often, actually.
Yeah.
It just doesn't usually happen within a minute of launch.
And from the launch, I'm glad it doesn't always happen that way.
I couldn't handle that one.
You know, from a launch team perspective, the natural reaction when everybody's ready to go and you hear that one system is no-go, there's a natural, you know, and that happened, and I wanted to make sure that it got the team back into the game, and we were technically no-go at that point, but we had window remaining, and so we're going to talk about problems until we run out of time, and so that was the first time when I said something to the team, you know, to kind of get back into the game. And then when we picked up the clock at 5 minutes, then there was the other natural reaction that, yeah, all right, you know, we're ready to go. And so I calmed the team back down at that time too, because then we were at 5 minutes and counting, and that's when the systems really start getting active on the shuttle and the boosters, and so we needed to get back into the game, and trust me, they calmed down and concentrated very, very quickly.
Yeah, Mike and his team did an amazing job. That's exactly why we train. You know, the mantra is under stress you fall back to the level of training you had, and that's exactly what happened today. Everybody fell back to the training, which told them to just stick to their guns and wait for the problem. You know, in the firing room, I have a phone. Mike does too. That's a direct line to the 45th Wing Commander, and the purpose of that is their system's no go. We can then find out, is this one we're going to fix or not, and should we proceed or not? And that's what happened today. We got the behind the scenes communication that we're not sure. Don't stop. This is not a scrub condition just yet. We're not sure. And so we decided to press on, and then they eventually did clear their problem. So.
Todd Halverson of Florida today. I may have missed this, but just to clarify, did the foam liberation that you saw come from areas of the tank that had been patched up, repaired, or modified? And secondly, could you remind me of the bracketing for the aerodynamically sensitive period? I think it's up to like 135 seconds, but could you refresh me on that?
Yeah, the foam came off from an area that we did not work on or repair. It was in the inner tank region somewhere, either in the inner tank or on the hydrogen tank side, right in that interface. And it was between the two big struts that come up and attach to the orbiter. The foam loss was at 351, and I think our ASTT is around the time that you said, around 135 seconds. So it was well after that point, and you can actually see it move forward. It impacts the strut, and then it doesn't come apart even when it hits the strut. So this is pretty thin foam, and that's evidence that when it hits the strut that it didn't break into pieces, that its velocity was very small. So then that's evidence that there was no air to really push it or accelerate it to cause potential damage to us.
Over here.
Hi, Eben Brown, Fox News Radio. Because of the extra little hold in there while the range issue was being worked on, what type of, if any, course correction or any type of engine burn or something once they're in orbit and on their way to the station to make sure they actually get to station at the right time frame? Does this change anything of how that works, or no?
Yeah, so the rendezvous profile that's built has the flexibility to accommodate the entire launch window. So none of the burns will move. I think the OMS 2, which is the first orbit insertion burn we do, I think that ignition time moved a couple seconds. I don't know that the magnitude changed at all, but basically the rendezvous profile is built to have the ability to adjust to make up for either changes in the station's orbit or in the shuttle's orbit. If there's a collision avoidance burn that has to be done, all that stuff, you know, we give ourselves built-in flexibility to be able to accommodate within a given plan for the rendezvous. So the technical answer is yes, it did affect us. The operational answer is no, it didn't have any impact to us.
Nancy Atkinson from universetoday.com. Could you describe the black slurry that was put on where the tile came off? it was described as a black slurry, but what kind of material is that?
Yeah, it's a first. There are many different types of repair techniques to tiles. You heard us talking about, was it top coat damage? Was it an old repair? Turned out it was a shaved tile that had this black slurry put on the top of it. It's kind of a thick. It's like a black paint, but very, very viscous. And they just kind of dab it on, smooth it out a little bit, and you're good to go. And really, that's just to protect the underlying silica substrate from any kind of exposure at all. It's a very, very standard repair. You see them all over the vehicle. No big deal.
There's another question over here.
Randy Avera with Interspace News for Gertztemeyer. Have there been any proposals from the commercial space industry to develop plans or to operate the Eastern Missile Test Range for commercial flights out of Kennedy Space Center, the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in general for the future?
I'm not aware of any, but I don't know. It's probably the easiest answer. I wouldn't be informed of them directly if there were some, but I don't know of any. So I think the answer is really we'd have to get you a more detailed answer, but I don't know of any.